You see, ladies and gentlemen, if an attorney general or deputy attorney general can appoint a special counsel with no criminal requisite whatsoever to investigate a president because they feel pressured to do so by the opposition party in Congress and by the media, that will fundamentally alter the way our government functions or does not function. And we now have people in the government, some in the bureaucracy, some in Congress, and we have people in the media. We're rooting for that outcome. They do not want a president like Trump or conservative or Republican presidents to be successful. So they want to constantly dog them. They want to have this new precedent set. And I'm telling you, we can't recover from something like this. That's why the president should not sit down for an interview. That's why they should take it all the way up to the Supreme Court. That's why we cross our fingers and hope the Supreme Court knows what the hell it's doing. May not. When I get to this issue of the New York Times, sulzberger family and the Oakes family have owned the New York Times since forever. So the kid inherited his newspaper, the whole company, which is not doing well financially, I don't believe. And this particular sulzberger came into power effectively in January. And he meets with the president. The president tweets about it, and then he says, look, I told the president that he has to stop criticizing the press the way he's criticizing the press, or we're going to have some violence here. And I'm thinking, have you not seen the violence against Trump supporters? The brutal attacks on Trump supporters who aren't bothering anybody? The most recent one in Hollywood, where the Trump star was destroyed and some Trump supporters went there and they were met by a mob and attacked. Have they not seen Antifa, which is a Marxist left organization, and the violence, I mean, real violence that organization does? Have they not told Maxine Waters to cut it out? Or Cory Booker now to cut it out about getting into the face of your members of Congress? I mean, the left is violent. The left is violent. Conservatives are not violent. Don't confuse us with neo-Nazis and Klansmen. That's not us. Conservatives are not violent. The entire Tea Party movement, there's been no violence. Tens of thousands of people gathering peacefully, making their voices heard, lobbying their members of Congress. But for the New York Times publisher to meet with the President of the United States and then say he told the President, stop criticizing the press because you're going to create violence, is really shocking to me. I do not understand why the New York Times is an institution in this country, where all the other press types say they take their lead from the New York Times. Why all the graduates from journalism schools across the country want to work for the New York Times. They are working for a newspaper, and I've said it over and over again, a newspaper that was involved in one of the most egregious acts of any free press in our entire history. The cover-up of the Holocaust. There's the New York Times, printed in New York. It's called the New York Times. A well-known progressive newspaper. A well-known paper that supports Democrats almost exclusively. That purposely push stories about the Holocaust either to the back pages or refuse to report on them at all. An entire book has been written on this. A self-examination of the New York Times was done. I encourage you to Google it, or Bing it, or DuckDuck it, or whatever, and research it. How can the New York Times be the paper of record? How can the New York Times be the paper of any kind of a record? How is it reputable with a history like that? And that's not so long ago. And a newspaper that is going to cover up the Holocaust, because effectively that's what it did, how can it be relied on to tell the truth? It can't. And they were caught again. It's very strange. I've explained this to many of you out there who are not Jewish, who are Gentiles, or atheists and so forth, about leftists who are Jewish. How they do not support the country of Israel, which is a Jewish state. Bear with me on this. Over at the Daily Wire, they have a story. New York Times makes reportedly false claim about Israel's founder, refuses to offer a retraction. And it's this. They use David Ben-Gurion, one of its founders, its first prime minister, with a debunked quote talking about giving up land that it had conquered, quote unquote, in the 6-Day War. And yet a transcript of the discussion that Ben-Gurion had says no such thing. But still the New York Times went with it and will not correct it. Why is that? Why is that? The reason is simple. Because the New York Times is run by self-haters. That's what I call them, as you well know. That's why. And they do exist. These are people who put their political ideology ahead of all else. And by the way, you find it among certain Catholics, certain Protestants, all religions. But I'm explaining it. And this is why the New York Times does what the New York Times does. There is a guy running for the Senate in Texas. And Beto, whatever his name is. And he's been running around the state of Texas saying, look, I don't take PAC money and I don't support PACs and this, that, and the other thing. Turns out he does take PAC money. Turns out he did take PAC money. And he took it from an organization that's anti-Israel, because more and more the Democrat Party and the left, this is where they're coming from. Is it not? Some of it is anti-Semitic, some of it is not. But it is a growing movement within the Democrat Party because of the left, and quite frankly because of our immigration policies too. Just telling you the truth. Can't get fired for the truth, can I? So this Beto guy, turns out he got money through and from an organization that spends its time attacking Israel and Israel's existence. And it's set up as a Jewish organization. The New York Times isn't going to report that. Guy's running against Ted Cruz in Texas. New York Times isn't going to report that. And when Hamas, a terrorist group recognized as such by the United States, does terrorist things on the Gaza Strip, which it controls completely and utterly, and pushes the women and children in the front, shooting at Israeli IDF, trying to burn the land around them, attacking people, and so forth and so on. News outlets like the New York Times play right into Hamas's hands, because Hamas does this for publicity purposes. It has no care whatsoever about death, the people who die as a result of this. And news outlets like the New York Times are the mouthpieces for Hamas. This is why I say they have blood on their hands. Because these terrorist activities by these terrorist organizations that result in death and mayhem are done because they want nothing more than to draw the attention of the reporters and editors at the New York Times for front-page stories and editorial support. So the gall of Sulzberger meeting with Trump and then saying he told Trump that his criticism of the press will get somebody killed or injured or create violence. What a pathetic, pathetic operation it is. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.